Pernell Roberts was the actor who played Adam Cartwright on the TV show Bonanza. He seemed like a really nice guy, calm, cool, and super charming. But under that smooth and friendly look, he was a man who believed in standing up for what he thought was right. He was someone who never stayed quiet, even when speaking up might get him in trouble. Most famous actors back in his time played it safe. They smiled even when they were upset and kept their real thoughts hidden away. But Pernell was different. He believed that telling the truth was way more important than being popular, even if it meant losing friends, not getting acting jobs, or losing respect from people in Hollywood. At many Hollywood parties and events, Pernell made it pretty clear that there were certain people he just couldn't stand being around. These were actors whose big egos, fake behavior, or dishonesty went against everything Pernell believed in. And today, we're going to talk about the 5 famous actors that Pernell Roberts really, truly disliked, along with the surprising and shocking stories about why he felt that way. Once you hear these stories, you'll never look at these stars the same way again. But before we get started, if you love learning about Pernell Roberts, or if you have a special place in your heart for classic Western TV shows, make sure to subscribe to our channel. That's because the real truth about Hollywood's golden days is way more interesting than the made-up stories they showed on TV. Pernell Elvin Roberts, Jr., was born on May 18, 1928, in a small town called Waycross, Georgia. This was a quiet little place in the deep South where life during something called the Great Depression was really, really hard. Times were tough for everyone back then. He was the only kid in his family. His dad was Pernell Roberts Sr., who worked hard as a sales manager for Dr. Pepper. Yes, the soda company. His mom was Minnie Myrtle Morgan Roberts, a loving mother who helped him explore his curiosity and creativity from a young age. Even when he was just a little boy, Pernell was special and different from other kids. He wasn't interested in getting into trouble or playing sports like most kids his age. Instead, he found happiness in music and performing. He played the horn in his school band and performed at church events and gatherings. He loved being on stage and making music. But even though he was naturally good at performing, acting wasn't what he planned to do with his life, at least not at first. After he finished high school, Pernell went to Georgia Tech, a college where he wanted to study engineering. He thought he would have a practical, normal career. But it didn't take very long for him to realize that drawing blueprints and solving math equations weren't what made his heart happy. That just wasn't where he belonged. In 1946, when he was still a young man, Pernell joined the United States Marine Corps. He served his country for 2 whole years. While he was wearing his military uniform and following the strict rules of the Marines, he found comfort in something familiar: music. He played the tuba and horn in the Marine Corps band, which kept his artistic and creative spirit alive even during the tough, disciplined life of being in the military. When his time in the Marines ended, Pernell decided to take a big, scary leap of faith. He enrolled at the University of Maryland, and that's when the stage called to him once again. He jumped into student theater with both feet, and he discovered something amazing: a deeper connection to acting. It felt less like just a fun hobby and more like what he was meant to do with his life. It felt like destiny. Before too long, Roberts made a really bold and brave choice. He decided to leave college behind completely and chase his dream of being an actor full-time. He set out on an unpredictable but passionate journey that would eventually make him one of the most unforgettable stars on television. In the early 1950s, Pernell Roberts packed up all his dreams and hopes and moved to New York City. This was a place where your talent and how hard you worked were often the only things that really mattered. If you had those 2 things, you could make it big. There, he enrolled at a fancy and prestigious school called the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. This was a place where he could learn more about acting and get even better at his craft. But while he was learning, he also had to work a bunch of random, odd jobs just to pay for food and rent. He had to make ends meet somehow. It wasn't an easy time, but Pernell was never the type of person to just give up when things got hard. His patience and hard work finally paid off in 1952 when he got his very first role on stage in a play called The Man Who Came to Dinner. It was just a small part, not a big starring role, but it was important. It marked the very first real step in what would become an amazing and sometimes rebellious acting career. It was a career that would be defined not by chasing fame, but by his refusal to live by anyone else's rules. He only wanted to follow his own script. After getting that first taste of success and seeing what it felt like to be on stage, Pernell threw himself completely into theater. His strong, commanding voice, his magnetic presence that drew people in, and his dedication to every single role he played quickly made him stand out from the crowd. Pretty soon, he was performing in some of the greatest and most famous plays ever written in history, plays like Macbeth, The Taming of the Shrew, and Romeo and Juliet. These are Shakespeare plays that are still famous today. His work with the Shakespeare Festival in New York earned him a really good reputation. People saw him as a serious, passionate actor whose depth and skill could make an entire room go silent. He was that good. By the late 1950s, the big movie studios in Hollywood had begun to notice this talented actor. In 1958, Pernell made his very first film debut in a movie called Desire Under the Elms. He starred alongside really famous actors like Sophia Loren and Burl Ives. His performance in that movie proved that he could hold his own and act just as well as the biggest, most famous names in the business. That same year, he also appeared in another movie called The Sheepman, which was a Western film. This was a hint at the type of shows and movies that would soon shape his destiny and make him famous. Over the next year, he took on roles in popular TV shows like The Virginian and Gunsmoke, steadily building up his name and reputation across the entire entertainment industry. More and more people were starting to know who Pernell Roberts was. Then came 1959, the year that everything changed for Pernell Roberts forever. He was cast to play Adam Cartwright, the smart and steadfast, that means reliable and loyal, eldest son on a new TV show on NBC called Bonanza. The show absolutely exploded. It became one of the biggest successes on television, and almost overnight, Roberts became a household name. That means nearly everyone in America knew who he was. Week after week, millions and millions of people tuned in to watch the Cartwright family's adventures on their ranch called the Ponderosa. And among all the characters, it was Pernell's quiet strength and sharp intelligence that really left a lasting mark on viewers. People loved his character. Yet behind all the fame and admiration from fans, Roberts felt something uncomfortable, a growing sense that the role everyone celebrated him for didn't really reflect who he truly was inside. There was a disconnect. The character people loved wasn't the real him, and that bothered him more and more as time went on. Pernell Roberts was never the type of person to stay silent when something didn't feel right to him. And on Bonanza, that personality trait made him both respected by some people and feared by others. He often found himself arguing and disagreeing with the show's producers. He was frustrated by what he saw as shallow, simple writing and the lack of real depth in his character, Adam Cartwright. To Roberts, the TV series had all the fame and popularity in the world, but it didn't have much social meaning or artistic challenge. The stories felt too simple and didn't tackle important issues. So in 1965, after 6 successful seasons on the show and right at the height of his fame when he was super popular, he made a decision that absolutely shocked everyone who knew him. He walked away from the show. He quit. Many people thought this would be the end of his career. They thought he was making a huge mistake. But Pernell wasn't afraid to start all over from scratch. He returned to his first love, the theater, while also taking on guest roles in various different television shows. He was determined to rebuild his career, but this time on his own terms. He wanted to do things his way. His persistence and refusing to give up eventually paid off. By the late 1970s, he landed the lead role in a new TV show called Trapper John, M.D. He earned critical acclaim. That means the experts and critics thought he was really good. And he captured a whole new generation of fans. Younger people who hadn't even watched Bonanza now loved him too. But behind that calm voice and thoughtful stare, Pernell still carried strong opinions inside him, especially about certain people he had worked with over the years. And that brings us to the part of his story that very few people have ever heard about, the 5 actors that Pernell Roberts truly couldn't stand, and the surprising reasons behind each feud and disagreement. Once you hear these stories, you'll never see these Hollywood stars the same way again. Let's dive in. Number 1, Michael Landon. At first, Roberts' relationship with Bonanza's youngest star, Michael Landon, was polite and even kind of friendly. But as Landon's ambition, that means his desire to be successful and powerful, grew bigger and bigger, the tension between them started growing too. Michael Landon was charismatic, which means charming and likable, and he was absolutely adored by fans everywhere. He was quickly becoming the show's golden boy, the favorite. Behind the scenes, however, Roberts saw him very differently. To Pernell, Michael was manipulative. That means he tried to control and trick people. Self-centered, only thinking about himself, and obsessed with having control over everything. As Landon gained more and more influence on the show, he began writing and directing episodes himself. He would often rewrite scenes to make his character, Little Joe, shine brighter and look better, sometimes at the expense of the other characters. That means he made himself look good while making others look less important. Roberts was absolutely furious about this. According to people who were there and saw what happened, insiders, Pernell once confronted Landon directly, meaning he went right up to him and said what he was thinking. He told him, "You're not trying to make the show better, you're trying to make yourself bigger." From that day forward, the two actors barely spoke to each other unless the script absolutely demanded it for a scene they had to film together. Roberts truly despised what he called Landon's perfectionist image. He believed Michael was a man who only pretended to be deep and thoughtful on screen, but avoided any real depth in his actual life. It was all an act, in Pernell's opinion. And when Roberts finally left Bonanza for good, Landon's silence, his complete lack of acknowledgement or saying goodbye, was the final insult. It was like a slap in the face. Years later, when Michael Landon found new fame with another show called Little House on the Prairie, Pernell Roberts couldn't resist making a sharp, cutting remark about it. "It's more of the same," he reportedly said. "He's still playing cowboy, still playing saint." It was a mean statement that revealed just how deep the resentment and bad feelings still ran between them, even after all those years. Number 2, Dan Blocker. Pernell's feud with Dan Blocker, who played the gentle and beloved character Hoss Cartwright on Bonanza, wasn't born out of anger or hate. It came from disappointment. He was let down by someone he thought was his friend. In the early days of Bonanza, the two actors were actually close friends. They were both classically trained actors. That means they studied acting in a serious, traditional way. And they were both passionate about giving their characters real depth and authenticity. They wanted their roles to feel real and meaningful. But as Robert's battles and arguments with the TV network grew louder and more intense, Blocker began to pull away from him. He started distancing himself. Pernell took this personally and felt really hurt by it. He believed that Dan should have stood by him and supported him, especially when he spoke out against the show's shallow writing and its lack of sensitivity toward Native American characters. Native Americans were often shown in disrespectful ways on TV back then, and Pernell thought that was wrong. Instead of standing with Pernell, Blocker tried to play the peacemaker. He was always smoothing things over and trying to make everyone get along, rather than standing up to the producers and network executives. To Pernell, that was a sign of weakness. He thought Dan didn't have the courage to do the right thing. In one bitter moment, Pernell told a reporter, Dan had the heart but not the spine. He chose comfort over conscience. That means Dan had good intentions and a good heart, but he didn't have the backbone, courage to stand up for what was right. He chose to be comfortable rather than follow his conscience, his inner sense of right and wrong. The tension between them reached its peak one day when Roberts walked off the set right in the middle of filming a scene. He was absolutely furious over what he called a degrading script, one that he thought was disrespectful and beneath him. When Blocker just kept on filming without him, Pernell confronted him later. He said quietly but very firmly, "You had a choice. You always had a choice." From that moment on, their friendship slowly crumbled and fell apart. Though Blocker never spoke badly about Roberts in public or to reporters, he also never defended him or stood up for him either. The silence between them said everything that needed to be said, and it was that silence that hurt Pernell the most. Sometimes what people don't say hurts more than what they do say. Number 3, Chuck Connors. This particular feud didn't begin on the Bonanza set at all, but it burned just as fiercely and intensely as the others. Chuck Connors was the star of a different Western TV show called The Rifleman. He crossed paths with Roberts at a charity event that was celebrating Western television legends, all the famous actors from cowboy shows. Chuck Connors was tall, confident, and absolutely adored by his fans. He had an undeniable presence. When he walked into a room, everyone noticed him. But according to people who were there that night, his behavior backstage told a completely different story. He was reportedly dismissive toward the crew members. That means he acted like they weren't important and treated everyone around him like they were lesser players in his personal show, like they were below him. For a man like Pernell Roberts, who valued respect and humility, being humble and not thinking you're better than others, above everything else, that kind of arrogance was absolutely unforgivable. He couldn't stand it. Roberts didn't like what he saw that night at all. According to witnesses, people who saw it happen, he stood quietly in the corner as Chuck Connors publicly scolded and yelled at a young assistant over a small, tiny mistake. It was a moment that revealed a side of Connors that very few people ever saw. Most fans only knew him from TV, where he seemed like a good guy. When the two actors met backstage later that night, Roberts didn't hold back his feelings. He let Connors know exactly what he thought. Words flew fast between them. It was a heated argument. Roberts called Connors a fraud, accusing him of caring more about being famous than about showing respect to other people. Connors fired right back at him, mocking Roberts as a bitter quitter who couldn't handle success when he had it. That confrontation marked the absolute end of any friendship or respect between them. From that day forward, Roberts referred to Connors privately as all hat, no soul. That was his way of saying that Connors was a man obsessed with his image and how he looked, but he was empty inside. He had no real substance. To Roberts, Connors embodied, represented, everything that was wrong with Hollywood putting on charm and being nice on camera, but showing cruelty and meanness when the cameras were off. Number 4, Lorne Greene. Among all of Roberts' conflicts and feuds, none cut deeper or hurt more than his feud with Lorne Greene, the man who played his on-screen father, Ben Cartwright, on Bonanza. To millions of fans watching the show, their bond looked warm, loving, and genuine. They seemed like a real father and son. But behind the scenes, it was anything but that. The reality was completely different. Roberts often said that the relationship felt stifling to him. That means it felt like he was being smothered or held back. He said that Greene, both on screen and off screen, had an air of control that he just couldn't tolerate. He couldn't stand it. Roberts resented, felt angry and bitter about how Greene seemed perfectly content and happy with the show's formula, the tidy, neat endings, the simple moral lessons, and the lack of social relevance. The show didn't tackle real-world problems. While Roberts wanted to push Bonanza toward something more meaningful, telling stories with moral complexity and human truth, Greene remained loyal to the network's conservative vision. He was fine with keeping things simple and safe. To Roberts, that wasn't professionalism or being a good team player. It was surrender, giving up. He chose comfort over courage, Pernell once said to a close friend. Greene picked the easy, comfortable path instead of the brave one. What began as artistic tension, disagreement about the art and craft of the show, soon turned very personal. Roberts believed that Greene saw him as a threat, a younger actor who wasn't afraid to challenge the scripts or question the direction of the show. On set, the air between them grew colder and more tense with each passing season. Roberts absolutely hated the way Greene's authority shaped the entire cast. He hated how everyone, especially the younger actors, seemed to follow Greene without question, like he was the boss of everything. They all looked up to him and did whatever he said. By 1965, Pernell had had enough. He couldn't take it anymore. He walked away from Bonanza and from one of the biggest paychecks in all of television. He was making tons of money, but he gave it up. He chose integrity, doing what's right over comfort. When people asked him why he left such a successful show, Roberts' answer was simple, honest, and perfectly him. He said, "I just couldn't spend the rest of my life taking my hat off and saying, 'Yes, Pa.'" He couldn't keep playing the obedient son who always did what his father told him to do. To the public and fans, Lorne Greene was America's favorite TV dad, wise, steady, and endlessly kind. Everyone loved him. But to Pernell Roberts, he represented everything he despised about Hollywood's fear of taking risks. Where other people saw warmth and kindness, Roberts saw complacency, being too satisfied with how things are and not wanting change. He saw a man who was too willing to play it safe, too content to keep things exactly as they were instead of pushing for something better. Number 5, James Drury. James Drury was known as the Stoic, that means serious and not showing much emotion, star of another Western show called The Virginian. His conflict with Roberts wasn't about acting styles or about who was more famous. It was about their values, what they believed in and what they thought was important. Pernell Roberts had always been very outspoken about the issues that mattered deeply to him. He spoke openly against racism, treating people badly because of their race or skin color. The Vietnam War, a controversial war that many Americans disagreed about, and what he viewed as Hollywood's cowardice in silencing dissenting voices. That means he thought Hollywood was acting like a coward by shutting down people who disagreed with the mainstream opinions. James Drury, on the other hand, was a proud conservative, someone with more traditional political views. who believed that politics had absolutely no place in entertainment. He thought actors should just act and stay out of political discussions. Their ideological clash, disagreement about big ideas and beliefs, came to a head in the 1970s during a televised panel discussion about the future of television. This was a public event where they were both on stage talking in front of an audience. Roberts passionately criticized the TV networks for avoiding real-world issues and turning Western shows into what he called comfort food for the masses. He meant that TV was just making people feel good without challenging them to think about important problems. Drury didn't hesitate to push back and disagree. He said, "The public doesn't want sermons, they want escape." He meant that people watch TV to get away from their problems, not to be lectured about serious issues. The argument quickly turned personal and got heated. Witnesses who were there recalled that when the event ended, the two men refused to shake hands with each other. They wouldn't even do that basic polite gesture. Later, Roberts told a close friend, "Drury was never just an actor. He was a mouthpiece for the status quo." That means Roberts thought Drury was just repeating what people in power wanted everyone to believe, not thinking for himself. What infuriated, made extremely angry, Roberts the most was Drury's silence during the civil rights movement. This was a time in the 1960s when Black Americans and others were fighting for equal rights and fair treatment. It was a really important time in history when voices could have made a difference. To Roberts, staying silent when people were being treated unfairly wasn't neutrality, staying neutral and not picking a side. It was betrayal, a betrayal of what was right. Through it all, through every fight and every disagreement, Pernell Roberts never bent to expectation. He never did what people expected him to do just to make them happy. He was a man of fierce conviction, willing to sacrifice comfort for truth. He gave up money, fame, and easy success because he believed in standing up for what was right. But while Hollywood knew him as bold, outspoken, and unyielding, never giving in, his private life told another, sadder story. It was a story marked by heartbreak, loneliness, and the quiet struggles of a man who demanded just as much honesty from himself as he did from the world around him. He held himself to the same high standards he held everyone else to, and that wasn't always easy. Pernell Roberts' personal life was just as turbulent, full of trouble and chaos, as his career was bold and brave. He married 4 times, and each marriage was marked by its own struggles and difficulties. His first marriage was to a woman named Vera, who was a theater professor. They got married in 1951, and together they had a son named Jonathan Christopher Roberts. Pernell loved Jonathan deeply and with all his heart, but his rising career and restless spirit made it really hard for him to stay anchored in family life. That means he had trouble staying grounded and focused on being a husband and father. By 1959, the marriage ended in divorce, and they split up. Though he remained in his son's life and tried to be there for him, distance and emotional barriers often strained their relationship. That means there were walls between them that made it hard for them to be as close as they might have wanted to be. His next 2 marriages, to women named Judith Annely and then Cara, also ended in divorce. Friends and colleagues who knew him often remarked that Pernell was a man who craved personal freedom. He wanted to be free and independent. He also found emotional intimacy, being emotionally close to someone, very difficult. He was fiercely private and kept his deepest feelings locked away inside, unintentionally building walls between himself and the people who loved him most. He didn't mean to push people away, but he did. Perhaps the greatest heartbreak of all came in 1989, when his only son, Jonathan, tragically died in a motorcycle accident. He was just 38 years old, still so young. The loss left Pernell absolutely shattered and broken. Friends who knew him said he was never quite the same person after that. And while he spoke very little about it publicly or to reporters, the grief and sadness lingered with him for the rest of his life. That pain never went away. In his later years, Pernell did find some solace, comfort, with his fourth wife, Alina Criswell, whom he married in 1997. They stayed together until his passing, until the day he died. She offered him companionship and peace during his final years. Yet even then, even with a loving companion by his side, the shadows of lost love, broken marriages, and the unbearable grief of losing his child never fully faded away. Those sorrows stayed with him always. Pernell Roberts lived his entire life on his own terms, fearless, outspoken, and unyielding. But the freedom he claimed and fought for came at a profound, deep, and serious, personal cost. Beneath the confident public image that everyone saw lay a man who carried a lifetime of quiet sorrow and pain in his heart. Pernell Roberts' life off-screen was a tapestry. That means a woven picture, or in this case, a mix of love, loss, and quiet struggles that very few people ever witnessed or knew about. In his later years, he chose a life far away from Hollywood's bright lights and attention. He embraced peace and privacy over fame and being recognized everywhere he went. After leaving Bonanza at its absolute peak when the show was most popular, he continued acting in television and theater, but always on his own terms. He only did projects he believed in. In the 1980s, he found renewed acclaim and success with Trapper John, M.D., captivating a whole new generation of fans with his commanding presence and depth of performance. Even as the spotlight slowly dimmed and he wasn't as famous anymore, Roberts remained uncompromising. That means he never compromised his beliefs or gave in. He was fiercely private and thoughtful. He avoided fan conventions where actors meet their fans, and he rarely gave interviews to reporters or magazines. He preferred to dedicate his time to music, working for social justice and fairness, and spending time with those closest to him, his real friends and family. Behind the calm exterior that people saw, he was facing a silent battle with a terrible disease, cancer. On January 24, 2010, Pernell Roberts passed away at his home in Malibu, California. He was 81 years old. He died from pancreatic cancer, a disease he confronted with courage and quiet dignity until the very end. His passing marked the end of an era in television history. It left him as the last surviving member of Bonanza's original cast. He was the final one left, and when he died, that chapter of TV history closed forever. Though he never chased fame or played the Hollywood political games that many actors play, Roberts' influence on television and acting was profound and deep. He was a true pioneer, someone who walked away from a hit show when it failed to meet his artistic and moral standards. That took guts. Long before it was fashionable or popular to do so, he spoke out loudly on social and racial issues. He demanded meaningful, honest roles, not just for himself, but for all performers, no matter their background. Fans remember him not only as the strong, silent Adam Cartwright from Bonanza, but as a man of conviction and integrity. His legacy isn't just about the characters he brought to life on screen. It lies in the stands he took, the risks he dared to take, and the lessons he left behind for all of us. Sometimes, he showed us, the bravest act of all is simply to walk away when something doesn't align with who you are. Pernell Roberts may have passed away, but his voice, both on screen and off, continues to resonate and echo with those who admired his talent and respected his unwavering principles. He never wavered from what he believed in. At his death, he left behind more than just memories and the characters he played. He left behind an estimated fortune of $10 million, money he had earned over his long career. For most people, Pernell Roberts' career would have seemed like the ultimate triumph and success. A lifetime of effort and hard work in Hollywood rewarded with fame, fortune, and recognition. But for Pernell himself, none of that ever truly mattered or meant what people thought it should. Money held little appeal to him. He didn't really care about being rich. Fame never thrilled him or excited him the way it did other actors. Even at the height of Bonanza, when he was earning nearly $10,000 per episode, which was a huge amount of money back in the 1960s, and became one of the highest-paid actors of his time, he felt a quiet restlessness inside. He felt an unshakable longing for something more meaningful, something that money and fame couldn't buy. While the world admired his polished, perfect performances and the glamour of television stardom, Pernell wrestled with the industry's compromises behind the scenes. He loathed, strongly hated, how art was reduced to a product, something to be sold. He hated how real emotion and authenticity were repackaged for mass consumption, made into something fake to sell to millions of people. He didn't want to be a celebrity who signed autographs and smiled for cameras. He wanted to live with purpose. He wanted his life to mean something. For a time, he played the part that was expected of him. He wore the costumes, hit his marks on the set, and accepted the applause from fans. Yet his conscience, that inner voice that tells you what's right and wrong, never allowed him to settle. His principles ran far deeper than the scripts that were handed to him. While fans were captivated and amazed by Adam Cartwright on their TV screens, Pernell Roberts was out in the real world marching in Selma, Alabama, alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He wasn't there as a famous star trying to get attention. He was there as a man who felt compelled, felt he absolutely had to act against injustice and unfairness. That wasn't a performance or an act. It was real life, and it mattered to him more than any TV show ever could. Back on the set of Bonanza, he challenged the system every day. He kept questioning things. Why were there no people of color among the crew members? Why did white actors repeatedly play Native American roles, putting on makeup to look like people from a different race? Why did progress move so slowly when it came to treating everyone fairly? His protests and complaints often went unheeded. That means people didn't listen to him or take him seriously. Yet he never stopped speaking out. He never gave up on what he believed was right. Family members and friends noted that he found some support from certain people, but never enough to extinguish, put out, the fire that burned within him. That passion for justice and fairness never went away. Pernell Roberts could have stayed on Bonanza. He could have built an empire and a huge fortune. He could have basked, relaxed, and enjoyed in luxury and comfort, living in fancy houses and driving expensive cars. He could have coasted on his fame for the rest of his life, doing appearances and collecting paychecks. But instead, he chose integrity over applause. He chose doing what he thought was right over being popular. He walked away not out of pride or ego, but from an unyielding desire for authenticity and purpose. He wanted his life to be real and meaningful, not fake and empty. That decision, that choice to leave fame and money behind, tells you everything you need to know about who Pernell Roberts really was. He was a man who would rather be true to himself than rich and famous. And in a place like Hollywood, where most people would do anything for success, that made him truly one of a kind. His story reminds us that sometimes the most important thing isn't what you gain, but what you're willing to walk away from to stay true to yourself. And that's a lesson worth remembering, no matter who you are or what you dream of becoming.